Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we're hopefully going to close out this article about Stanley Presley, and we're going to move on to a new topic in the next video, but we've got to hear what Dee and her boys have to say about Ginger Alden. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Pamela. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We're going to get started with a song, and this is Face Me Like a Man.
I hear him loading up the stories, I hear him dialing up the dates, I hear his brothers turning witnesses to the pain he couldn't shake. Says everything he got from him, but I can hear the hurt behind it like a crack of blame. Dave's boiling blood is pounding on the gates of Grace Lane, shouting, "Face me like a man," but never knowing he was hurting. He left town in the night, not to hide, just to breathe, but they took it as a knife, as a wound they couldn't leave. They saved his life, they say they stood their ground, but he was burning from the inside, and they never heard the sound. Face me like a man. He gave love and friendship every chance, but it slipped right through their fingers, chip and swallowed by the cracks of time. Sabotage his name, gonna sabotage in their own pain. They loved him, yeah, he knows it, but they love the legend more than me. Friends calling every friend Elvis ever had, asking dates, asking stories, turning memories into shrapnel for a book full of worries. Says he wrote it for the money, then he says he wrote it out of love, but love don't come with lawyers and a push from up above. Dave bursts in a gumbold on his hip, says he ain't here to hurt, just wants to look him in the eye and hear the words again. But the wolves were in the fall, the wolves they never saw. They saw the jumpsuits in the spotlight, not the threat behind the wall. They say they knew his shape, they say they knew his fall, but they only saw the surface while he was screaming through it all. Face me like a man. He loved friendship every chance, but it slipped right through their fingers, chip and swallowed by the cracks of time. Sabotage his name, gonna sabotage in their own pain. They loved him, yeah, he knows it, but they love the legend more than that. He called red when he knew the book was coming. His voice was shaking like a sinner in the pew. He wasn't angry, his heart was broken. He was scared of losing those with whom he shared the truth. And when the radio said his name that August morning, they pulled their cars to the side of the road. They cried, they froze, they remembered the man they couldn't reach anymore. Face me like a man. He was dying in slow motion, trying to hold the world together with a heart that lost devotion. Sabotage my name. No, this was always a two-way flame. You loved him, yeah, he knew it, but you couldn't see the man. Never meant to lose you. You were never meant to run. He didn't want to face the ending of the story you left.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to keep hearing those echoes from Dee Stanley. But first, we're going to hear what's on the bookshelf. We're going to start with a non-Elvis book, and we're going to look at an Elvis book. We always do too. And so today's book is going to be Who Is That Man? And it's got this picture on it. Do you guys know who that is? Who is that man? In Search of the Real Bob Dylan. So this is a biography of Bob Dylan, who wrote every rock and roll song you ever heard. Pretty close. Pretty close. If he didn't write it, Neil Diamond did. It's not exactly true, but it is kind of a truism about rock and roll. There's the back. This is a large print edition. It should be really easy to read, but I've never read it. I've always wanted to. I know that Bob, that he respected Elvis, and that there would be no Bob if there wasn't Elvis. And I have read books about like Jim Morrison and such. I've just never read one about Bob and always wanted to. And someone got me this book and I've just never gotten to it yet. And here is the Elvis book for the day. It is Elvis and Me. So yesterday we saw Me and Elvis by Charlie Hodge. This one is by Priscilla Presley. Although it's actually written by this other woman, Sandra Harmon. It says with Sandra Harmon. It means like with her typewriter. She's basically the one who got all the words onto the page and into a printable format. Out of the oral telling, which is, I believe, most likely how Priscilla presented the information. And here's a picture of Priscilla from the time. Now, I found this book in a thrift store. It was the only Elvis book on the shelf, and you don't find a lot of Elvis books in thrift stores. So I debated whether I wanted to buy it. I wasn't really reading about Elvis at the time. This was way, way back, a long time ago. And I had read Elvis biographies, and I wanted to read more, and I thought, well, why not read this one? Didn't really know anything about it or Priscilla. It cost, I think, $2, so it was quite an investment at the time. I don't know that it's worth a lot more than that now. I think if you went out online, you could probably get this book fairly cheap. It's been in several editions. There's lots and lots of copies of it floating around out there. Nearly everybody who has an Elvis shelf has it. But it's definitely a perspective piece. There's a single perspective that's told throughout that book. And now let's move into the story that we're here to see, trying to wrap up this one particular article that we've gotten into that Dee Presley has a lot of quotes in. We're in Memphis. It's 1978. And Marion says, which version of the truth is this? It was the first one. Well, because there's this new writer involved, I would also say that this was the first. This is when Priscilla's myth-making capabilities moved from just herself, from whatever stories she might have told to the press, or because she was handling all of her own publicity, I believe, before that, for the most part. She had some lawyers that had spoke for her a couple of times. Maybe one out of turn that we had seen said she was the widow. But by this point, when she publishes the book, she's brought in a specific person to work for her, to be her voice. So her voice becomes crafted at this point. I think it was moving in a certain direction before that. She certainly had goals and ambitions and ideas of where she wanted it to be, of where she wanted to go with the story, of how she saw herself. I think all of that was wrapped up in it. Not to say that she was a complete villain in it. I know a lot of people think so, but I think some of it is her own self-image. But by this point in the mid-'80s, she's now hired somebody that's with the blessing of like EPE, people who are going to make a lot of money if she's presented correctly. And then her image becomes crafted, professionally crafted, much like Elvis's was in some ways professionally crafted, but she's still running it. It's just that it's polished at this point. And that's why I think people really liked the book initially, and why a lot of people still like it. It's well written, it's an easy read. It kind of makes sense from the perspective that it's written in. So you don't have a lot of, if you don't know the Elvis story very well, you don't get caught at any of the points that like you or I would get caught on as you move through. So I think a lot of that is involved in that particular book. And then there are other books like her newest one, which I would say is a recrafted, repolished version of the same polished stone. It's like taking your diamond back in, and they've somehow restored clarity, although the clarity is certainly refracting a lot of the truth into something that it probably wasn't. Hi, Patty. Thank you for coming. And Marion says that she can't get any sympathy for her. Well, I don't think a lot of people can. But we're not going to talk about her today. We're actually going to talk about Dee and what Dee has to say about Ginger Alden. I'm just going to run through these pictures of Dee and her family very quickly. I'm not even going to commentate on them. If you want the comments in the commentary, you can have it. It's in the previous episodes of this particular miniseries, and they're available in a playlist for you, all about Dee Presley, along with a couple of other episodes I've got out there. But we've been over all of this. We've talked about each of these people so that we can understand who we're talking about today. One of those other episodes was Dee Presley's Bible. And she had this Bible. She wrote the whole family in it except for Elvis. It's very odd. And a few more pictures of Dee and her family. Now, this is the seance that she held, one of them. She held two shortly after Elvis's death, where Elvis, she said in the first one, apparently he talked through one of the psychics that was there, and he told Dee that everything was going to be all right in her divorce. She was going to get the money that she wanted, is basically what this article says. And I believe that's why she contacted him, to make sure that everything was going to be all right on her side here in the mortal realm. And you can watch a whole video on that. First month after, what did Dee do? So this was September 1977. Now Dee, she spoke later, had these pictures taken for this article. Elvis's family speaks. It's in the Midnight Globe, revealed secrets of his last hours, the drugs, romances, and the heartbreaking ending. Priscilla haunted by Lisa kidnapping threats. And so this was November of 1977. There's also an article in this that we can see that's David Stanley, and he says, Elvis is dead. I tried to kill myself. And there is a picture of David Stanley, and it's not the most flattering picture of David I've ever seen. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Tammy. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here, too. In the Midnight Globe from December 13th, 1977, Elvis's stepmom reveals for the first time. That happens a lot with Dee in these magazines. It's often a first time. It says the truth behind the Presley divorces. So it's not just Elvis's divorce, it's hers too. And then we're looking at the article that's in this magazine, Elvis's Family Secrets, an intimate look at the women that he loved, and the stepmother talks for the first time. Well, wait a second. Well, she talked right here on this one from December 13th, 77. She talked in this one we just looked at, November 1st, 1977. She talked in this one where she had a seance. It feels like Dee's been talking a lot for this to be the first time that she's talked in November of 1978. And then it says the most important thing, it's all highlighted in yellow, exclusive preview of sensational book. So this book did come out in 1979. It's also got a date of like 1980 in there, which I think is a later edition or something about the way they put the copyright in, but it has a copyright of 79, and the book I'm talking about is Dee and the Stanley Boys book, which was Elvis, We Love You Tender. And this is the article, Elvis, the intimate story of his sad life and the women that he really loved. And Tammy says that Dee talks a lot to herself. Hi, Francis. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. I'm going to skip past this article about Evel Knievel. But here we can see the three loves of Elvis's life according to the article. Priscilla Presley, the loneliness was too much. Linda Thompson, she bathed and fed Elvis. And Ginger Alden, Elvis would have married her. So we've talked about Priscilla. Dee's talked about Linda. Dee says that at near the end of the relationship with Elvis and Linda, and now I've talked about this before. They were at a concert. Linda got upset. Ginger happened to be there not happened in the sense that Elvis had brought her into the city. This was at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. Now, the hotel wasn't the Cow Palace. That was the performance. But whatever hotel they stayed at, Ginger was there waiting. Linda did not know that Ginger was there, but she believed that somebody was there, and she was angry, and she left Elvis. And they did not see each other again. However, that didn't immediately sever all ties between them. And Francis says that Dee had said that they divorced because Vernon was too devoted to Elvis, and Elvis's life was like a black hole. I think I remember her saying that. But what Dee has to say about Linda and the end of the relationship is that Linda lived in a house which Elvis bought her near Graceland. And he used to go round there, but his visits became less frequent. So before Linda moved out, she already owned a house in Memphis that was bought by Elvis. She also had an apartment in LA, and Elvis was paying for that. I'm not sure that Dee knew about that. A lot of people don't know that Linda had these other assets already worked out before she left, and Elvis was happy to give them to her. I mean, I'm not trying to pretend that she got them out from under Elvis or anything. He was a full participant in this, and he bought her a house and had her live in it outside of Graceland. So I feel like Elvis was telling Linda something. And it seems like Dee may have noticed it too, because she said his visits were less frequent. And Debbie says that Elvis paid Linda's plane ticket and he had Ginger in a hotel. And Linda said she sensed something was going on with Elvis. Of course, Linda said that long afterwards, and when it was well known that something was going on. Now, what she doesn't mention is that Elvis thought there was something going on with her, because she had this interest in one of his band members, and things have been going on, and Larry had already seen it, And he'd already told Elvis. And Debbie says Elvis never told the ladies he was leaving them, but he said it in other ways. I guess giving them hints as he did with Anita Wood. Bingo, that is the Elvis pattern. Elvis does not break up with anyone. You had to have done something really extraordinary for him to break up with you, even if you're not a woman, even if you're just a friend. He does it gently. He does it over a period of time. He just kind of moves you out of the circle, eases you out of the inner circle into the outer one, and then pushes you on past that one a little bit. But sometimes, as with Anita, it does not go as gently as he would like. And he's also not taking a full stand there. He's like giving people a chance to, I guess, get back in his good graces, or maybe he'll change his mind. He'll feel differently about them in a little while. So I think he's giving himself some room that his judgment is sometime in error because of the enormous pressures that he's under. Like he's trying to be fair to both them and himself. And Francis says that Elvis also bought Sam Thompson, Linda's brother, and Sam's wife a house, and I think her parents too. Yeah, he was a buying guy. So Dee says, finally, Linda sent a note to Elvis saying it was all off. Elvis knew what was coming. Elvis read the note, played the piano for a while, and then he wept. I wonder if Dee saw that. I mean, she sounds like she actually saw this happen, this note come in and Elvis read it, and then he played the piano and he wept. Or is this something one of the boys told her? I don't remember if Linda says that she wrote a note like that. I'm going to have to go back and look. And Dee says, after that, Elvis became more and more withdrawn. And then I heard there was a new lady at Graceland. So Dee's not really there. I don't think Dee saw this thing with the note, because Dee's not there. She's not at Graceland. She's hearing that there's a new lady at Graceland. Well, the new lady at Graceland doesn't appear until after Linda leaves, which is December of 1976. And Dee is not around at that time. And Dee says this new lady, this was Ginger Alden. Elvis introduced her to me and asked me to be kind to her. Now, in the book that she published in 1979, the year after this interview, Dee says, I could see what Ginger was trying for the brief moment I saw her. Ginger may have been trying to look like Priscilla, but I saw no resemblance. But don't you know that it must have made Ginger happy any time that somebody said that to her? But then there were other women in Elvis's life who tried to look like Scylla too. So she says that Ginger's dark looks were an apparent attempt to look like Priscilla. I don't know that Ginger ever resembled Priscilla enough that I would jump to a conclusion that she was attempting to mimic Priscilla's look. I think that the whole culture, to some extent, in the young lady field, they were all modeling Priscilla about that time. But I don't think it came across in Ginger Alden all that much. But what do you guys think? Do you see Priscilla in Ginger Alden the way that Dee does? And Debbie says that she doesn't know if this is true, but she'd heard that Elvis had stopped paying Linda's mortgage or rent in the house after they broke up. There was definite misunderstandings about what would and would not continue to be paid for. somewhat like with the Aldens after he passes away. And Pat points out that Linda still had Elvis's credit card. Or Linda still had Elvis's credit card. And she did. She racked up, for the time, more than a normal man's salary for the year on it. And Debbie says she agrees with Dee on that one with Priscilla and Ginger. But Priscilla had blue eyes that stand out. So you do think that she looks like Priscilla. That's interesting. And Pat's wondering about the credit card. Oh, yeah, it's true. She racked up something. I want to say $25,000, but I don't want to give that number without, we haven't been through the timeline. I hate to talk about stuff we haven't all been through together, but it is common knowledge that she spent a lot of money after it was known that they wouldn't be together anymore. And Pat says she doesn't think Ginger looks like Priscilla. And Debbie says well, let me see. But Debbie's saying she doesn't see any resemblance, but she does see that Ginger was trying for it, I think is what you're saying. And that Priscilla was very beautiful when she was young. Yeah, she was always very beautiful. I think some of the surgeries might have been a major error for her. And Jeff says that he thinks I'm in the ballpark. Probably about the credit card, I'm guessing. And when did Elvis take the credit card back? Pat's asking. Well, I think when Vernon started noticing the bills and said, Elvis, are we still supposed to be paying for these? And, like with all of the guys who left, it's had some kind of monetary or financial arrangements. Vernon took care of it. And Marion says that she agrees with me that Ginger doesn't seem to be imitating Priscilla, even though she looks a little bit like Priscilla. And I think that look is more of they kind of look like Gladys in a way. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming. If I didn't already say hi to you, always get lost as we're going through the chat. And Debbie says that Priscilla should have never gotten that plastic surgery. I gotta agree with that. There's at least one of them she shouldn't have got. And Jeff says exactly that it's Vernon's had to come to the rescue on all these kind of items. And now here's what Dee has to say about Ginger. After Elvis had introduced her, asked her to be kind to her. Dee says, I only saw Ginger 2 or 3 times after that, but I was always polite as she was to me. Isn't that weird that in the book that she printed, she says, for the brief moment that I saw her, and then she describes that she looked like Priscilla, but in the article the year before, so the article isn't, it precedes this book. And so I think maybe the book was already written. So maybe she's building on what she told the person to write in the book. Or the stories evolved the opposite way where she saw her less, which doesn't make any sense. But here in the magazine article, she saw her 2 or 3 times. Now, obviously, this isn't quite accurate because 2 or 3 is not accurate. It's either 2 or it's 3. But I think what that also means is it could have been 1. And it's just a very interesting look at how we use language to shape our memories into what we want others to perceive. And Frances points out that Ginger herself has aged very gracefully, and that Priscilla with her surgery has not. I have to agree with that. Ginger is still exceedingly beautiful, and I think Linda's in the middle, but I think she's also had some of the surgeries. So, and that's just something that people, I mean, I guess it's still common today. I guess it's still going on. It's just better, so we don't notice it maybe as much. But it's a very specific look from like 1990s and early 2000s plastic surgery. And Pat's asking, why did Vernon not like Ginger? I think it's the same reason. Well, I think we're going to hear from the boys, and it's the same reason. Rick Stanley, he says in the book that Terry Alden, who was Ginger's sister, Ginger has 3 sisters. And I think that Ginger is the middle. I think Terry's the oldest and the Rosemary's the youngest. I'm not exactly sure, but Terry Alden, Ginger's sister, is not beautiful, but she's a pretty girl. And if you just sit down and talk to her for 5 minutes, she becomes radiant. That's how Rick Stanley felt about her in 1979. Which means that's how Rick Stanley felt about Terry probably in 1976, the very, very end, December or November. That's about when Elvis met these girls. And then Rick says Rosemary is a really nice kid. Ginger was more pretty-faced than her sisters, but man, if you sit down and try to talk to Ginger, you can't get anything out of her. She's not smart. So that's the way Rick felt about Ginger. She wasn't smart. So I guess it's possible Vernon felt that she wasn't smart either. And Marion says that many famous American people have plastic surgery and destroy their good looks. Is that not as much of a thing over overseas in Germany and Britain and stuff? That's kind of an American thing. I've wondered about that. And Debbie says that at first Terry was supposed to be with Elvis, but Elvis chose Ginger. That is correct. And Elizabeth says she thinks Ginger was very beautiful. But according to Rick, she's not very smart. Now, I've heard Ginger speak. And I've seen her speak several times on different videos. I've never met Ginger in person. I've read Ginger's book. Of course, like all the books, I don't think Ginger wrote her own book, but she is eloquent when she speaks. I've never gotten the impression that she was not smart. I have gotten the impression that she is, she chooses her words very carefully, that she does not speak in haste, and that she doesn't answer bluntly to anything. She's considerate of other people's feelings, even those that have wronged her, is what I've noticed. So, I don't know that I would, maybe she was different. I mean, I'm sure she was quiet, but Rick has equivocated that to not smart. Now, what David Stanley says, same time period, he says, we wanted to know if Ginger was for real. We always suspected Elvis's women, and then we see him fall head over heels for this girl. So there's a whole lot of statements there, but to answer Pat's question about why did Vernon not like Ginger, I think this is it right here. That David's reflecting Vernon's actual feelings, which is, we wanted to know if she was for real. We always suspected Elvis's women. That's the thing. Anytime there was a new woman, they suspected her. And it wasn't just the women. Did he pick up a new guy in the inner circle? We suspect him. Did he invite somebody over to Graceland for the first time? We suspect them. Is he doing business with someone for the first time? We suspect them. And this is the normal operating procedure for the Memphis Mafia and those around Elvis. And it's supposed to be because they're supposed to be securing his safety. And that's part of it. But it becomes a mindset. And so this poor young girl that comes into the mix, well, she must have ulterior motives because all of us have ulterior motives. They're all thinking about money. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing they were all thinking about money, but it's foremost in many minds. And David says, then we see Elvis fall head over heels for this girl. And somehow that gets interpreted to mean she's taking advantage of Elvis in some way. Like, how does an older man falling for a younger woman mean that she's taking advantage of him at his own house? Like, it's all crazy, but that's what they believe. And that tells you something about, you know, they're always watching for when Elvis is giving things to other people. And we've heard after his death, many of them came forward, including Aunt Lillian, to say that those things he gave to others really should have been given to us. That was kind of the message behind what they were putting out there. We were in need, but he gave cars to strangers. We were in need, but he got new girlfriends and took them to their grandpa's funeral in his jet plane. And Elizabeth says people used to say that she wasn't smart either because she was quiet. So you can identify with how Ginger must have felt when she read things like this. A lot of people say they didn't read these books and such, but if you lived it, I mean, I feel like you would have been pulled to read it. Or even if you didn't, somebody would have told you, hey, I read that book you were in. Let me see. Just make sure, see how much I'm missing out of the chat here. And Debbie says the one Elvis liked to play around with was Rosemary. There are pictures of them together smiling and messing around. And Pat says she thinks Ginger was too smart and didn't say anything, but saw everything. That's a very good point. Ginger's biggest crime is that she wasn't Linda. Linda is a very outgoing, warm person, and it feels like sunshine is pouring out of her all the time. And Ginger's just a reserved, normal person, and that doesn't happen. And therefore, something's wrong with her. She's after something. She's got ulterior motives. She's quiet because she's plotting. And Debbie says that Ginger's sister, you can see Ginger laughing in the pictures. Collections Body Future. I don't think I've ever seen you here before, so welcome to the chat. Appreciate seeing you. Collections Body Future says, I think Ginger was very smart. Loose lips sink ships. You're exactly right on that. She wasn't there to create issues, and she didn't realize that by being quiet, you could create all this mystery around you, which created issues. Debbie Flores says that Myrna Smith of the Sweet Inspiration said Ginger was not naive. I don't think she meant that in a kind way, though. I know the quote you're talking about. Let's see. Francis says, I think Elvis was with Ginger more as a trophy girlfriend, just to have someone by his side. But I don't think he would have ever married her. Yeah, I think he was spiraling that. I think that what you're saying is partially true. Like, it started like that. But Elvis, I think he fell in love real easy, right? Like, he couldn't be around someone for too long without having a deep emotional connection to them. But I don't know. There's definitely that trophy wife thing, because there's a story that the pilot for that Lisa Marie tells that Linda Thompson got on once, and he said something or eyed her in a way that Elvis warned him about in a joking manner. But he's very clear that he was eyeing Linda and that Elvis had caught it. And this was, just a kind word between two men that this one's mine and keep your eyes off her. And Debbie says that Ginger was not naive at all. She may have been young, but she wasn't naive. I would say that's true as well. And Pamela says maybe she didn't like Rick. That might be really true as well. Now, you got to think about Rick and David at this time. Here are these two boys. They think they're the top. They think they are handsome. They're very handsome boys. And they know they're handsome. And they know that girls like to look at them. And they know that they get certain attention because they're Elvis's stepbrothers. They have a connection. But they're also both admittedly doing a lot of drugs at this point in time. So their personalities and affect at any moment in time, especially David, like he's all over the place. But Rick is there as well, depending on what's going on in the moment. That's not invisible to other people. They think it's invisible. Rick and David think nobody notices that these things are happening, that these habits they're engaging in. But it's very possible Ginger, even if she couldn't identify it, felt the wrongness in the air at certain times with both of these individuals. And Elizabeth says, I think that you fell in love easy also, that Elvis fell in love easy. It's been said many times that he loved all of his women. And I think that's true. I think it's really true that I don't think Elvis lied to people. I think that he felt emotion very intensely in the moment. And then later it wasn't the same way, but in that moment it was. And Debbie says that he wasn't serious about Ginger, but his ego was bruised when she didn't do what he wanted her to do. What, according to what Myrna Smith said from the Sweet Inspirations, there's truth to this. Ginger was not a pushover, but neither was Linda. And that's what drew Elvis to a woman. So his ego was bruised, but it was bruised in a way that he kind of enjoyed. Now, Ginger, she didn't know when to stop like Linda did. But Ginger didn't understand the dynamic that was going on either, I don't think. At least not at first. And Pat says that Billy and Joe Smith are jealous of Ginger because she was taking Elvis's attention away from them. I think there's some truth to that. And Collection says that Ginger was not plotting, and he thinks that some aspects of Elvis respected that she was not performing for everyone in the world. Absolutely. That's a tension that Elvis feels, and he knows that it's like a guitar string. Every note on the chord, on the string is right, but there's one note he's searching for, and he can't quite get it with Ginger. But she's doing a lot of the right things. And Elizabeth says that she respects Ginger more for not hanging out with everyone that ended up using Elvis for whatever they could get. Now, that's an interesting point, too. And she did not feel comfortable with these people. And that makes you wonder about them, because everybody felt comfortable with Elvis. But a lot of people didn't feel comfortable with the ones that hung around him. And Pat says that she thinks Elvis wanted a family and wanted full custody of Lisa to have a stable home. I agree with that. And Debbie says it was more. It wasn't like he was crushed because it was love. It was like, how dare you tell me no? There's definitely part of that. I mean, there was a challenge there. And Elvis liked to rise to the challenge. And Jeff says that Elvis was very complex. He was. But we all have these pieces wrestling inside of us. It's just that we can see them more clearly in Elvis because we have all of these people that are giving us so many of the perspectives. And Debbie says that Myrna Smith said Elvis had told her about Ginger. That's true. Elvis talked to a lot of people. And what he told those people doesn't match up quite right. And so I believe that Elvis used people, his friends, those he could trust, ones he thought weren't ever going to tell us that he told them these things. Right? So, and where does that line get drawn on what you don't and you do tell? I don't think he ever envisioned Myrna Smith telling us anything he said about Ginger, just like he didn't think Billy and Joe Smith ever would. And he certainly didn't think any of it would ever get back to Ginger, because he's very considerate of people's feelings and he would not want her to be hurt. But he needed to talk to somebody about these different thoughts that he had. He had to get them out of his mouth. He had to hear them in the open air and have those he could trust walk around those thoughts and say, yeah, you're thinking right here, or I'm not sure how we ended up at this conclusion, Elvis. Maybe we should look at it again. She's a good person. Something like that. Now, none of them said that to him, I don't think. But it's not just Ginger. He's done this with many, many different issues that he's had in his life. He's told one person one thing, he's told another person another thing. And I think it's like when we look at the spiritual books, he's taken this idea and he's spiraled around it over and over and over. And he says, what if I stop here? Maybe this is the right spot. And then he says, what if I stop here? And then he's thinking none of it feels right. And that's why he's talking it over with others. I think people do this with like their religious leaders. And I think more and more people are doing it with AI today, which is really a mirror into yourself. And then it reflects back to you those thoughts, but it says them more clearly than we usually think them. And then you're able to discern, oh, this is crazy. I shouldn't tell anybody else this. Or, hey, there's a kernel of a good idea here I should develop. And Pat says Ginger saw what the others were doing behind Elvis's back. That's true, too. Debbie says Vernon said Ginger didn't talk much, and she didn't. She kept her mouth shut. That was very important to Elvis, I think. A lot of people couldn't keep their mouth shut around Elvis. That was probably very attractive, even though it made it very difficult for him to judge what she was thinking. And Pat says that they shouldn't judge someone who does talk. That's not right. They never gave Ginger a chance. I don't think she was there long enough for them to give her a chance either. But I think it's not just that they didn't give her a chance. They start out purposely not giving anyone a chance. And Collection says that the leeches around Elvis were afraid of any woman who didn't follow the Memphis script. I think there's a lot of truth to that. If they didn't see a way that they could latch on and control you in some way, have some form of power over you, then you were a threat. Especially if you were talking directly to Elvis. You threatened their very livelihoods. And Pat says that's funny because Lisa also often referred to them as leeches. Now, David Stanley, he says, Ginger was freaked out, to say the least. Heck, she was under a lot of pressure because she just didn't know how to act. Ginger didn't know what to do. All of a sudden, Ginger was brought into Elvis's life, and the man's telling her that he loves her. Wow, that had to be blowing her away. I sympathize with her because I understood the position. Now, I do think that Dave is onto something here, that Ginger is shocked at first. There's definitely a period of shock. It doesn't last the whole time that they're together into 77. But December, January, February of 77, I'm sure these are shocking months where she's living in a daze. And then I think she had to have come out of it a little bit after that for sure, if not prior. But I don't really understand what David means when he says that he understood her position. I mean, what does that mean? It's like all of these people, they're projecting what they would have done if they had been Ginger. And most of those projections revolve around what I would have taken from Elvis. And Pat says that in her opinion, they loved Linda and hated Ginger from the beginning. Yeah, but I don't think they loved Linda from the beginning either. I think by that last year, Linda was a fixture, and therefore you loved her or you were gone. You were already gone. And so, yeah, now there was a change. I think it's more about they just hated change. But Linda was a known quantity. You knew whether she liked you or whether she didn't. Nobody knows who Ginger likes. And Elizabeth says she definitely thinks it was a shock to be hearing that Elvis loved you. And Rick Stanley, he says, Ginger's kind of a sore spot with me because I think Elvis was being deceived by Ginger. I think it was sad. I don't want to blow the girl down. She's an all right kid, but she just didn't know what was going on. She was just trying to play the role of Elvis's girlfriend. Yet another odd Stanley statement. This one's by Rick, but he's saying he's got a sore spot about Ginger because Ginger was deceiving Elvis. And then the next sentence says he doesn't want to blow the girl down. Well, if she was deceiving Elvis, why wouldn't you want to let us know? Then he says Ginger's an all right kid. So this kid that's deceiving Elvis was an all right kid. And then he says Ginger didn't know what was going on. How did she deceive Elvis if she didn't know what was going on? And then Rick says Ginger's just trying to play Elvis's girlfriend role. Well, is that deception if she's trying to play the role that Elvis wants her to play? It's not a very generous statement towards Ginger. It says she's a liar, and then it says she's not a liar. But he basically says, I think she's a liar because she's not a liar. And Pat says that she thinks they would have hated anyone who took the attention off them, and that to her, that's childish. I agree. I think they would have disliked anyone that was taking Elvis's attention away from the inner circle. And Elizabeth says that Rick Stanley should talk about being a sore spot. And Collection says the other way to read this is Ginger turned Rick down. Huh. That does seem to be an accurate reading of the statement. She's an all right kid, but unlike her uglier sisters, she didn't want anything to do with Rick. Because he did like her sisters, although he did make it clear that Ginger was the pretty one. David Stanley said about why Elvis suspected David of making a pass at Ginger. Now, isn't it funny that she seems to have turned Rick down, and Elvis is suspicious that David made a pass at her? Seems like maybe they both were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, but David says the reason that Elvis suspected me was because Ginger was so young that we could relate. So basically he's saying Elvis was an old man that could not relate to Ginger. She wasn't really interested in him because he was an old man. Now, he doesn't come right out and say that, but it basically says that she would be very interested to talk to someone who was her age, who was David. David says Ginger was 20. I was 22. And we could sit down and talk. You know, did you see Paul McCartney last week? What does that mean? Does that mean David went and saw Paul McCartney and knew him, or that he saw him in concert, and that he thinks Ginger's going to watch the Beatles as well? Ginger's kind of young for the Beatles, actually, but did you see McCartney last week? Did you hear this? Did you hear that? And I used to do it just to be nice because she was Elvis's chick. Is that why David was talking to Ginger? Because she was just Elvis's chick? He's just doing it to be nice. He didn't even know why anybody would want to flirt with Ginger. And then David says, Elvis just got that impression because I used to flirt a lot on tour. With who? Who was David flirting with that Elvis got this impression from? Now, what David doesn't mention here, of course, David was married at the time, but he's out on tour flirting a lot with people. So Elvis is well aware that David's not held within any marital bounds. So here he is just talking with Elvis's chick, and Elvis feels like maybe he's hitting on her. And apparently there was this Ricky issue that caused Ricky to have a sore spot. Hi, Big Money Mike. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And there's a discussion about me late. I'm happy if you guys just show up at any time. Is fine with me. I don't care if you're on time or if you're late. You watch on the replay. If you chat or you don't chat, you comment or you don't comment, you like or you don't like, by which I'm like, go ahead and like that, hit that like button now. Everybody hit the like button. Subscribe and make sure that you know when the next episode of Hillbilly Cat History is going to appear, which is tomorrow at 10 a.m. EDT time, which is Eastern Daylight Time. I don't know what time that is in your part of the world for sure. But the second show will be at 3 p.m. EDT. And that is at 7 p.m. UK time right now. But in a couple of weeks, it's going to change again. So be sure that you're subscribed. And so David Stanley has been suspected, making a pass at Ginger. And then Rick and David are both asked, would Elvis have married Ginger? And Rick says, I don't think so. Elvis may have been engaged, but he made the statement to me that he wasn't ready to get married. David thinks that Elvis really dug Ginger, whereas I don't think so. So Rick acknowledges this is his opinion, that he doesn't know. He does say Elvis made a statement to him that he wasn't ready to get married. Now, did that mean at that moment? Did that mean never? Did that mean it wasn't going to be Ginger? Do we want to put a lot of faith in anything that Rick says that David told him? Should we run forward with this particular piece of knowledge and say, well, it must be true, Rick said it? I don't know. David Stanley says, Elvis didn't say when he said, but he said to me, I'm gonna marry that girl. So to Rick, Elvis says, I'm not ready to get married. And to David, he says, I'm going to marry that girl. See, Elvis says different things to different people, assuming that we can trust what's being said about what was said to these two different people. But again, we got to make a kind of a stretch to make that true, because both of these individuals have a multitude of different ways they tell these stories. And David says, I personally don't think that Elvis would have gone through with it, but who am I to know? So that's funny too. Elvis says, I'm going to marry that girl. And David says, no, he's not. He's not going to marry that girl. But who is he to know? And then David says, I have to say one thing, though. That girl was taking advantage of Elvis. She was going for a buck, and she proved that after he died. Now, David says this in 1979 in a book which he and his family are being paid to produce. Ginger didn't write a book. Ginger was in some movies. Ginger, she did the same magazine kind of thing that these guys have done, although she wrote her own. She didn't allow others to write her words. But the money came from the same place, right? And she didn't write a book, and he is writing a book. And in the book, he says that Ginger was trying to make a buck off of this. And so she proved that she was trying to take advantage of Elvis. What does this book prove about David and Rick and Dee based on David's logic that certain things that you do prove that you're making a buck off Elvis. What are those things? Are they things where you make a buck? Because this says that Ginger was going for a buck. Doesn't say she made it. I'm fairly certain David's got a check in his pocket as he says this. I'm just looking through the chat. And Pat says that she never gets a notification, but she knows when I go live. That's true because I do so many lives. YouTube doesn't want to support all the notification pushes. So they will typically only notify people once in a 24-hour period, which translated to the way their system works means once in a 48-hour period. But who am I to quibble? I'm like David Stanley. Who am I to quibble? We got some people from Kentucky here and people in the USA. And Big Money Mike said he's had his air conditioner on. I've had it on yesterday. I don't have it on this moment, but yeah, it's getting hot down here in Georgia. And we got some words on the screen. These are from Dee. It says, Elvis said you are quite a lady. And those were the last words that he ever spoke to me. And that's where we've got to end it for today because we are over the hour. And I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us and for being here. I greatly appreciate your time and your presence, your thoughts, your comments, your chat. And I want all of you to keep on taking care of business. I'm going to send us out of here on a song. It's going to be a song that reflects the meat shop that we've been looking at on screen in the background. And everything Elvis would have had to go through emotionally if he had to read any of these articles. This is the line between you all keep on taking care of business.
I hear the static rising like a storm behind your breath. Every truth you're trying to name is shaking what we had left. You say the world's gone sideways and I can feel the tilt begin. Two voices on a wire and the ground won't stay still again. I'm not calling you a liar, I'm just trying to understand how the stories got so twisted between the heart and the helping hand. There's a line between us traveling, but I'm holding while I can. In a world that's spinning crazy, I'm still reaching for my friend. If the truth is breaking open, let it break us into light. Two hearts on different journeys, still trying to make it right. We built a house of loyalty, but the floorboards start to groan. Every secret that we carried now demands to be known. Say you're still my brother, but the silence cuts like steel. I'm standing in the doorway trying to tell you what I feel. I'm not trying to accuse you, I'm just naming what I see. All the shadows in the hallway where our trust used to be. There's a line between us trampling, but I'm holding while I can. In a world that's spinning crazy, I'm still reaching for my friend. If the truth is breaking open, let it break us into light. Two hearts on different journeys, still trying to make it right. I don't want to lose you, but I can't pretend I'm blind. There's a storm inside your story, and a storm inside of mine. If we meet again in mercy, let the past fall where it may. I'll be standing in the open if you choose to walk this way. There's a line between us trembling, but I'm holding while I can. In a world that's spinning crazy, I'm still reaching for my friend. If the truth is breaking open, let it break us into light. Two hearts on different journeys, still trying to make it right. Yeah, the line between us trembling, but I'm holding through the night.
I was sitting by your side in Lisa's room with your hand in mine, when you whispered of December and a church you'd already seen. You spoke of rosebuds on my dress, gold sparks shining when I turned, and I felt like a storybook princess in a world I'd finally earned. You said you'd tell the world in Memphis, 2 weeks and you'd say my name. You talked to children in the choir like a candle's gentle flame, but the morning stole you from me like a breath that slipped away, and the plans we made together all dissolved in a single day. Oh love, I'm walking through the shadows with the glass slippers you left behind. I reach for you in the silence, but only memory answers mine. A part of me went with you where the spirit and the body meet, and I'm learning how to live again with one heart broken, one still beating at your feet. You said life and death were woven, 2 threads in the same design, but I shook as I knelt beside you, calling your name like it still was mine. Lisa cried and ran from the doorway, her world falling like shattered glass, and I held the ache inside me as the moment turned to pass. You always said that love was light, a spark God placed in every soul. Now I search for it in the darkness, trying to trust what I can't control. If distance closes in the end, then maybe you're not far at all. Maybe you're just in the quiet where the spirit hears the call. Oh love, I'm walking through the shadows with the glass slippers you left behind. I reach for you in the silence, but only memory answers mine. A part of me went with you where the spirit and the body meet, and I'm learning how to live again with one heart broken, one still beating at your feet. I'll keep the dreams you gave me, no one can take them away, and I'll carry your light inside me till we meet again someday. For love is stronger than sorrow, and faith is stronger than fear, and I feel you still beside me, soft as a whisper in my